In this video we're going to turn epoxy resin into craft ale. Actually all I could manage was a realistic looking river section, so that'll have to do you. Hello everybody, this is a video that's inspired by, well, I suppose a fairly famous YouTube video by Luke's APS, which was done about 3 years ago. It's had over 1 million views. Luke's APS is a really good YouTuber who did a resin-based river section video about 3 years ago, and it had a ridiculous amount of attention. And it was one of the first terrain videos I saw. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to have a go at that. So this is it. This is my version of it anyway. As you can see, we're not going to be using foam base. We're going to be using the sort of sections of unused flooring which has been in previous videos I've used, something like around my garage. We're going to be using some sort of filler and PVA mix that I use to make the banks and things. And then we've got ourselves way too much resin. I went a bit mad. This is quite a high quality resin. I'll talk about that when I use it.
It's £100.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've also got an assistant. There he is. That's my son Fraser, who's helping me today. And yeah, I spent 100 quid on 5 kilos of resin because I'm an idiot. So I'll talk a bit about why I spent that much and what it is when we actually start using it a bit later. But that's our basic ingredients. So without further ado, we'll get into the first bit. I should add here, I suppose, that the 7-year-old doesn't stick around for the resin pour. Obviously, he's here to help do this bit, which is we're taking the PVA and filler mix and sticking it on the base to create a nice banking. What I'm trying to do here is create a sort of uneven and realistic riverbank, which is going to be about 1.5 centimetres high at most, because the pour of the resin is only going to be quite shallow. It's only going to be about 1 centimetre, probably less than that, 0.5 centimetre. So we're slapping this stuff on. At this point my assistant got bored and left me to crack on with this bit. So I just carry on building up the banking on both sides on this test section. And I'm also slapping down some of that mix in the middle there to create an uneven and higgledy-piggledy sort of riverbed. Here I added in some wider bits of banking and shallower bits, just so it looks a bit more like a river, so it's not the same width all the way along. Here the assistant's back, helping me to just stick a really simple base coat on all of the sections. There's 5 sections in total, all 18 inches in length, and this is just brown household paint that we're slapping on to the base. Then it's just a few static grass tufts stuck on here and there to represent reeds and overgrown bits of the bank as well. Next it's a coat of PVA just on the riverbed itself. This is where we're going to start putting down some ground cover and rocks and bits and pieces on the riverbed. So the first thing that's going to go on there is a layer of Luke's APS base ready patchy plains mix, which is basically a mix of different sizes of gravel from fine to little stones mixed in with a bit of dirt, and there's a little bit of static grass in there as well, which just gives it like little bits of green. And on the bed of a river you often see sort of river moss and stuff, and I don't know, seaweedy type stuff, don't you, on the bed of a river, so I quite like the fact there's a tiny bit of green in it. And I'm just doing this down the very centre of the riverbed and leaving some little gaps of PVA at the edges near to the bank itself. And then I'm getting a mixture of very fine sieved earth, which is my own homemade mix, which is literally just sieved and ground down dirt, which I'm putting towards the edge of the river close to the banks, which tends to be on a real river where you see fewer rocks and there's, you know, before it turns into kind of a beachy bank, this is where I put the finer stuff. After that's dry, I just give everything a little dry brush of a kind of ochre, which just stops all of this detail and stuff disappearing under what will be a resin with a bit of colour in it, just because the highlights a chance of sort of showing through, and so everything doesn't just look the same. And this is what it looks like at this point. There's a fair bit of detail in there. Just leave that to dry for a little bit. Then at this point on the test base, I do put the static grass on the banking, both sides. For the rest of this, I did this last, once everything including the resin had dried, but for some reason at this point on the test base I put the grass on now. And at this point, before the chemicals get involved, I'm pretty happy with how it looks while it dries. I just wanted to talk quickly about this resin, because as you heard earlier, yes, this, what's in front of you, cost 100 quid. But you don't need to spend that much. In fact, I recommend you don't. I got this stuff because I went to a plastics wholesaler, a trade place, and basically said, give me the best resin that you've got in the smallest quantity. And this is all they would do, which is 5 kilos of it in total, both together, which was 100 quid, which works out at 20 quid a kilo, which is a lot, an awful lot, but it's the best stuff that a plastics wholesaler does. And I went for it because I'm probably going to use resin quite a lot in future, over the next couple of years. This will last that long in the tubs like this, and I don't want anything which is going to discolour or give me hassle and is going to work. So that's why I went for it. So in the long run it'll probably be a good investment. Now, I've learned quite a lot about resin in the last couple of days, probably more than I wanted to. But as you can see, epoxy resin comes in two parts. It's 2 chemicals, a hardener, and the resin itself. So let's just lift off this lid. That's your resin. So as you can see, it's slightly grey-blue colour, and your hardener is much clearer. Basically, how this works is you mix these 2 chemicals together and a chemical reaction starts, which over time leads to it sort of starting to turn to treacle initially, and then anything from a few hours to a few days later it will harden into rock hard clear plastic. Make sure you wear gloves when you're handling this stuff. It's a chemical. Wear proper rubber gloves. Don't get it on anything. Put stuff on your floor. If you spill it, weirdly, as you can see, it doesn't dry. It just sits there like that. It's, you know, it's proper unpleasant stuff, to be honest, if you're not careful with it. And whatever you do, if you've got anything that you don't want to use, or you've mixed together and you're not going to use it, don't pour it down the sink or a drain. It's a pollutant. It's dangerous. It's a chemical. It's essentially a poison. Don't put it into any kind of water system. If they've got stuff that you don't want anymore, even tiny bits of it, put it in a container, put it in your garage the way you would do with paint or something like that. And if you really want to get rid of it, then take it to your proper household waste recycling centre. Don't just pour it away because it's dangerous. Treat it like a paint, basically. It's that kind of chemical consistency, except it's even worse because it doesn't dry. And yeah, as you can see, this is a type of resin where you would mix 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. I used the scales, so I would do 200 grams of resin to 100 grams of hardener and did it like that. If you get it slightly off, then it won't work. You'll either have something that never dries, worst case scenario, and you'll have something that's tacky and you will ruin whatever you've built. So yeah, just be careful with it and use it as exactly as you can. One thing which does get overlooked elsewhere, I've seen, is before you start pouring anything, make sure that whatever base you're using is on a level surface. Doing that, just use a spirit level. I got fairly lucky in that this ramshackle workbench in my garage is actually pretty good, and I got away with it. But you know, if you're significantly off, this stuff will settle wonky. So make sure you're level before you start pouring. And then obviously before you pour anything, you need to make sure that the ends of your sections are sealed in properly to stop your resin basically pouring out all over the place. I've seen lots of people use tape. On this test piece I used 2 big bits of gaffer tape stuck on the end. as tight as I could, thick stuff, and even sort of like blocked it in a little bit with masking tape as well. This didn't work terribly well on this test piece, which I'll talk a bit about in a minute. And then using kitchen scales, we're on to measuring out your resin, which in this case I did 150 grams, so I did 100 grams of resin, and then I weighed out 50 grams of hardener, giving us a 2:1 resin to hardener ratio. Then it's time to mix the two together. I just poured the hardener straight into the resin. Don't think it really matters which way around you do it, to be honest, because you're going to mix it together anyway. And then you give it a good old stir, just with a bog standard stirring stick, being careful not to drip it all over the place. It does go slightly cloudy to begin with, but that's nothing to worry about because it soon clears up. And I mix this good and proper for a good couple of minutes, just stirring away like this, and then it goes pretty fine. And then I put some colour in, because rivers aren't clear, and neither are they blue. If they're either blue or clear, then they're probably horribly polluted. So I put in some brown Vallejo ink, in this case 6 drops I think it was, and a little bit of green Vallejo ink, 6 drops as well in total. Straight in there, mix it together. I mean, any sort of artist style ink will do, I think, but I just had Vallejo because it's what's to hand. I went for this kind of colour because when you actually look at a river, when you're stood on a riverbank, they do tend to be a sort of browny green. Obviously they get clearer the closer you get, but at a distance, certainly from sort of standing away from it, they're never clear or blue really. And you just stir this in again for a couple of minutes to make sure it's all evenly mixed in, hold it up to the light, job done. Okay, this is it. I'm quite nervous. Obviously the big problem is whether or not it's going to leak, but we've got masking tape and gaffer on the ends there. Won't use all of this, so I'm just going to probably do about half. See how we go. Oh god. Ooh, that moves quick. That moves really quick. Right, I'm just going to leave that for a sec. It's moving quite fast. I think we want a touch more. It's found one end now, so we'll see whether or not it's going to leak. It's alright so far. We're sort of at the point now where I can't really do much more, so what will be will be. Turned out that what would be in about an hour or so when I came back to it was that it had leaked in 1 or 2 places. So annoyingly it had gone through 1 or 2 cracks, which you can see in this photo. So around the edges of those grassy banks it found somehow 1 or 2 little cracks in the sort of filler and PVA mix, annoyingly, and seeped through. It had gone through the ends a little bit as well, which I had to tidy up at the end, and I'll talk about how I fixed some of this a bit later. But yeah, the tape thing didn't work perfectly, but I got away with it. There we go. As you can see, once that test bit was done, I cracked on and did the rest. Waited for it all to dry. It's probably about 36-40 hours from pour to being completely set, this resin, and then all the rest of the other 5 or 6 bits of sections I stuck the static grass on last. The problem with this is it's really tempting to faff about with this stuff and to check whether or not it's dry and to prod it and to maybe try and stick the grass on before it's fully dry. Obviously don't do that. as tempting as it is, because you will get a load of stuff stuck in it. You'll get your fingers stuck in it, you'll get your static grass stuck in it, so wait until it's completely hard. As you can see, this is absolutely solid now, 30-40 hours on, and just a few bits and pieces I've done, so you can see there's parts where the banks widen and create little curves. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with the result. It's taken quite a while, you know, it's not something I'd want to do as a complete beginner. I'm glad I've at least got a bit of patience and a little bit of experience before I tackle something like this. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think it looks really good. I think that the key problem, of course, was managing these leaks. And as you can see, sort of on the back of this one, for example, it's leaked underneath the masking tape just there. Which you can sort of shave off and peel down. It didn't go any further than underneath the tape, but once it's dry, it's just a case of making sure that you peel it off. It's a bit of a faff. And if anybody knows a totally foolproof way of sealing in resin once you poured it, let me know, because I'd say at least 1 in 4 of these sections leaked in some way, even over the sides and through the cracks slightly. And next time I'll definitely try something different on the seal. And I'll definitely use some proper modelling compound rather than this PVA and filler mix that I use, which cracked a bit and meant that resin leaked through a bit. So yeah, we're all done. Let me know how you've done this, or if you're about to try it, down in the comments. If you've got any suggestions or tips of stuff you spotted that I've done that I could have done better, let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you can, please. And I'll see you next time for another video. Bye.